I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to Leadovation. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. This podcast is dedicated to the art and science of innovative leadership. Through insightful interviews with industry experts, I bring you cutting-edge strategies and experiences of innovative leadership, helping you think differently, act strategically, and achieve remarkable results. Join me as I provide insights and tools that empower you to make smarter decisions, forge meaningful relationships. Welcome to Leadovation. Why do smart people with the same recipe get totally different results? Well, in this episode, Manny Fiteni explains mind congruency, i.e., when your conscious goals and subconscious conditioning don't match. And what happens is you'll sabotage progress without realizing it. We talk about practical leadership moves like rapport, safety, language, and Manny's simple method, catch and replace, to rewire habits over time. So if you're stuck spinning or watching your team stall, this one will hit home. So many people would say that they're in the business of change management. And I think that's true. We are all trying to change something about ourselves, our teams, our companies, our families, what have you. We do not have a problem with information. We have a deluge of information. So we might read something, hear something, and we might want to try to apply it. But we might bump up against a wall and go, why can't I get the result that somebody else got? Yep. If it's about performance, you gave me the recipe. Why doesn't it work for me? And I think teams would be a part of that. Anybody would be a part of that. Could you explain your work relative to mind congruency and how you work with mindset as it relates to performance?
Sure. So you mentioned change management. A lot of change management is about process and getting the right, and that's an important part of change management. The work that I do entails that, but it also entails the person making it happen. It reminds me of a conversation I had some years ago with the CEO of a fairly large mortgage broking and financial planning firm. And I was working for this company. I'd just been hired. He hired me and as an employee at the time. And we were talking about sales. And he said, it's all about the numbers. It's just about the numbers, da, da, da. And he's right. Numbers are important. Without those results, we don't get paid. I said, you're absolutely correct, but you're missing a piece. And the piece you're missing is the person who gets you the numbers. If you don't have the right person or the way the person operates, you don't get those results. So you can badger them as much as you like, but you're still going to get some mediocre results out of it. So the work that I talk about is we look at, we start at management, we move our way down. We look at the way a person operates. So we are the sum of our histories, and our histories are from day of birth, how we are conditioned, how we are trained, how we think. So you and I have different backgrounds, and I don't know your background intimately, but if I did, I might get an idea of who Dean is in front of me. Who is this person? And why, if I said to him, or I said to you, I need you to do X, one person would go, yep, I can do this, not a problem. Another person in the head would go, that's too hard, or I don't want to do this, or I have a fear of doing this. And so they may self-sabotage themselves. And we see this all the time without being aware of it. So my work is around taking management, understanding their management styles to start off when we talk about managers, looking at the traits of managers. So we look at the framework, we look at the lead, are they leaders? And then do they have what we call mind congruency? So if you like, let me go into a little bit of an explanation of what that means.
Please.
So most of us understand that there is a conscious mind and a subconscious. They operate a little bit differently. The conscious mind is pretty much where you're making a lot of your decisions, your conscious decisions. You may set a goal, for example, and the goal may be, I want to do X. Now, depending on your conditioning, usually from childhood, determines what that result looks like, which is
Mm,
important to me as an executive for teams that work for me. So the conscious mind recognizes that we exist. It has a short-term memory, and it's kind of our analytical part of us. Then you have this subconscious part. And the subconscious was there from day one when you were born. Your conscious wasn't. So your
mm,
subconscious is something that was conditioned by its environment around it, usually your parents or your carers. So if I hung around you long enough and I saw certain habits, I'll be going, so Dean, which parent does that?
mm,
And you'd probably go, hold on, what are you talking about? I'm going, because you're displaying a habit that has probably come about from your childhood. And
mm.
that's probably, it could be your mother, it could be your father. And a lot of cases, it's a habit that you hate in that parent, but you display it because that came from your conditioning from childhood. So your subconscious has your long-term memory and it has what I would call your operating system. So I like to use computers as a good example of that. Think about um, a computer, and in the computer is all this coding that the programmer did originally of what's meant to happen when I type in what I want to happen, my result that I want, and there's a bug, and I get a different result. And I go, this computer's not doing what I wanted to do. And I try it again, and I get the same result. Now try to place that over onto a human being. We say to a person, we need you to do this. Now, let's say, for example, you had a fear of heights, and I said your job is to clean windows off tops of buildings. Now, I know you wouldn't apply for that job if that was the case, but I could do that because I don't have a fear of heights. If I physically could do that, um, but someone who has that fear or that conditioning in their operating system will not be able to do that. Now, that doesn't affect us in most types of jobs, but now put that into a job environment. If I said to you, you've just been put into a sales role, and in your head, you think salesmen are dirty people, you have an image of what that looks like, and that's your operating system's image. You'll most likely sabotage your results.
So, if I could, this is really fascinating. I've got a couple of questions that come to mind, Manny. So, if I take a look at myself, I have been described as being very much of a planner,
Mhm.
very proactive, risk taker, visionary, idea guy. And I guess it's kind of your typical entrepreneurial setup. Now, if you were to say, Dean, which parent displayed that? I would have to go, I don't think either of them did.
Something like that may not be. It's usually other types of habits. But if we
Okay.
talk about, I mean, you're a planner. So I used to
Right.
be many years ago, I was a financial planner.
Right.
Um, so there's a certain thinking, there's a certain way that you operate. And a planner is usually someone that can go into detail, but entrepreneurs not necessarily. So I'd have to determine that if I was talking to you.
And I forget the name of the author. Gosh, I got the book here somewhere, but as I was thinking about his work, um, I found in the exploration of what he was presenting that my planning piece, my almost hyper planning is actually subconsciously, as I was thinking about it, a need for security. And so then I could map that back. Well, when did that start? And so that I can find some childhood examples of when security was at issue. I don't mean physical security, but it just in
No, no,
terms
no.
of
I
how
actually
the
get it. You,
world
you need
worked, parents
actually,
divorce, you feel kind of like who's the one that's going to take care of me when you're a really young kid. That certainly was the case. And so my planner characteristic, I think, didn't come from necessarily my parents were great planners. It came from my reaction to a
uh,
need for security,
in that example, it's actually control. You need to control
control.
over the situation. So you lost
So
control when your
why is
parents
that? I mean,
separated.
now I'm getting a therapy session here, right? So why is that control versus security? Where security,
Security is
the
part of that, but we don't feel secure. You feel that your world is out of control. You can't control your safety. So in your
hmm,
case, you may have
hmm,
felt that. You may have felt that I'm insecure about the situation and I can't control the situation. I can't bring my parents back together.
Right.
But when you plan the future, you can, to a point, control the future.
One at least thinks they can.
No,
And that's my
there's a caveat
fallacy.
with that. You can't
I
control the future, right?
yeah, if you think that if you plan well enough, you can, but you realize that's just BS.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that wasn't the statement, was that you definitely can control it. It's more of the way you were thinking.
Yes.
The reason I talk about the subconscious versus the conscious is that the conscious mind is the one that'll say, this is the target, this is what we're aiming for. The subconscious mind, depending on the conditioning over the years, will determine on how you display that, how you make that happen. So you can take two highly intelligent, highly educated individuals and get two different results. And you would say, hold on, they're both really smart. They're both maybe top of their classes. Shouldn't we get a similar result? Not necessarily. And we
So
all know this instinctively.
we do if we pay attention and spend some
Yeah.
time and kind of piercing that veil beyond the prefrontal cortex conscious mind into the subconscious mind. I hear you. Then how do you use this knowledge to work with teams to get them to not just look at actions and plans and tactics and strategies and goals, but the mindset that runs all of that?
Okay. So the first thing is to understand, how do you talk to that mindset? How do you talk to that subconscious? Because the conscious mind is like a gatekeeper. If I said to you, I want you to do X, and you be going, no, I'm not doing that. I know what he's trying to do. I'm not going to do that. You won't even get through to the operating system. So the operating system works in metaphors and symbols. It's symbolic. That's why when you watch a movie, you get really engrossed, or when you read a book, or when you listen to a great joke. What you do when you build those various types of mediums is that you want to have an entertaining story, because the entertaining story engages the conscious mind, which is now almost shut down, paying attention over there. What you want in the story is the symbolism and the meaning that sits behind it, because the subconscious will then understand what sits behind that.
So the subconscious mind pays attention to metaphor
Correct.
more than the conscious mind does?
Correct.
Okay, that's very, very, very interesting. So again, continue the story because I'm really fascinated by this now. If you're working with a team, they've got some goals, they're kind of sabotaging themselves, not because you know that, but because you kind of can sense
Yep.
that they're getting in the way. There's some dysfunction, right? There's dysfunction in the team. They're not getting along well. We're not executing. We're not meeting
Yep.
goals, blah, 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 blah. How do you approach them around this topic when they might go, Dan, Manny, you're a great guy, but this is just too woo woo for me, man?
So it depends if you're talking to a management team versus a normal team. And I get the woo-woo bit because
Yeah.
it's never discussed in management. And I'd been in executive roles for a long, long time. I never ever saw it discussed. So when you're managing a team of your own, and you said they're dysfunctional, for example, the first thing is to understand, firstly, is to build rapport. If you have no rapport with the people you're dealing with, no one's going to be listening to you either.
Okay. Rapport. Got it.
Right. So first you have your rapport. The second part is to set the scene, for better words. In other words, people have to understand what the parameters are and what's kind of expected. So sales is a good example. I worked with lots of sales teams in my career. And essentially, a salesperson who's really good at sales almost has no filters. And what I mean by that is not that they're not professional. It's my target's here and I'm just going for my target. And I'm just going to keep going for my target. And sometimes they go outside what you probably should or shouldn't do. I'm not saying everyone breaks the law. But when you're managing that, you set the parameters for your team. So a salesperson might be, look, I know that you want more money. I know you want more budget, for example. Up front, I tell you what I can do. Here's your parameters so you know what you're working with. so you don't keep coming back for more. In regards to how you work with this team, they have to understand that it's safe. So the amount of people or managers I may have said, well, do you have an open door policy? And they go, yeah, anyone can come and see me anytime. Go talk to the staff and ask them if they want to go see you anytime,
Hmm.
because you as the manager are projecting onto them. So if staff feel uncomfortable coming to you, most likely they're backstabbing you because they obviously don't feel comfortable with you as a manager. So you set the environment so people understand that we are in this together. And it is a terminology I used to use when I was in management. We are in this together. It isn't just about me being the boss and telling you all what to do. If something hits the team, I take the blows for you. I'm the person that stands up for you. And that's a really important part of the atmosphere. I've seen great managers and I've seen managers throw their people under the bus to protect their own careers.
Sure.
Everyone in the team sees that only once, and that team will never trust you again. And that's the environment part I talk about.
Okay.
The other part is true leadership. So it's one thing it's a little bit like a parent saying, now, I don't want you swearing in public. And then you go out and start swearing in front of everybody in front of them in public. And they're going, if you act like a hypocrite, then I actually don't know if I can trust you with anything that you tell me to do. So leadership is also example. The last one is the mindset. So your question was, how do I sell the woo-woo in
Or how
your
do
own
you
words?
change the mindset, really? How do you
Okay.
get people's minds? So what I'm thinking here is, what you described is fantastic. It's good leadership, emotional intelligence, culture building work that one could say, yeah, we all should be doing that. But I don't know whether anybody, well, they are, but there's not a lot of people talking about the mindset behind all that. So let's hear
So
that
how do you
next and last
change it?
stage. How do you change
So
mindsets?
okay. So the first part I mentioned at the very start of this is rapport. We've got to
Yeah,
get along for you to even listen to me.
right.
Um, the second part is recognition of where the issues are. If you're not in tune with your own team and you're not aware where their failings are, how can you address them? So that's throws back on you as a manager. The third part is you don't talk to a team and say, you don't need to talk about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, because yes, for a lot of people that's strange, unless you're really into it.
Yeah.
What you do is you then do what I described before, is you start using stories, etc., so they relate to them. So I did this many times in my management positions, whereby someone would be failing, and because I built rapport with them, I'd get to know them. I get to understand that maybe the failings had nothing to do with their work, had to do what was sitting at home, or it could be dealing with something that they're not aware of, that something is blocking them. They don't see it, but other people can see it, right? That is when you start to tell a story that they can engage in. Now, you can use a real story or you can use a fake story. Subconscious doesn't know the difference. I prefer real stories because
Yep.
that always easier for me, because I have lots of stories from work.
So if we do a story, I'm assuming, so tell me how this works. I gather that the story has to be well chosen with the intentionality of the storyteller, that what I'm trying to do here is open up somebody's thinking to change their mindset, that the story has been curated with the idea, whether I know it or not, to hit this subconscious level so that we can change someone's mindset. So we're not just, because you could
Correct.
probably create another story and it just reinforces their paranoia, their self sabotage, or whatever
Right.
else, right?
It can go either way, right?
Yeah, it can go either way. A
We
good
see that
story.
in
Okay.
media.
So are you suggesting then the people who are practitioners of what you're talking about use metaphor and stories with the intention to change mindsets, and that they are
Correct.
curating those stories accordingly?
Correct. So it doesn't have to be overt. You don't have to stand in front of your team and say, guess what? I'm going to work on all your minds. Right.
I get that.
Because you're going to get that resistance from the,
Yeah.
hey, yeah. Look, I learned many years ago hypnosis, and I had the attitude when I first started that you ain't going to hypnotize me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but then when you understand what it really is, and you go, oh, okay, I'm not threatened by this thing. You can't make me do things I don't want to do. Right.
Manny, if I may interrupt though, but I do, even in my work, um, I will tell people about the conscious and subconscious mind and how much we are aware of and not aware of, and how many decisions are actually being made consciously versus subconsciously, and they kind of go, "Oh, that makes sense," and then it opens them up to be able to hear what I have to say, which just sounds a lot more woo woo. But if I hadn't given them that sort of statistic in the background, they probably would be resistant.
So I think you use, I'm going to say common sense, but I think you become aware of who your subject is in front of you, for better words.
Sure.
In other words, if you're seeing that they're open to things, like some people really are into their own development, and you pick that up from conversations and knowing who you're talking to.
Yeah.
When you get that, they eat this stuff up. They go, I really, really want to know more about this. So you do share that with them. But if you've got someone who has a different mindset, I'm just here at work, I'm just here to get this thing done, but I can't understand. I can see your face going, I can see some issues here.
Hmm.
So tell me what you're thinking and I'll go into more detail.
So you're working with a team. You have had some of these steps that you just described. I don't need to repeat them. You've had some metaphors, some stories that have been curated to be able to change mindset. How do you know whether or not the mindset has adapted to this new perception that you've been suggesting that they take on?
So you're going to either see it in results or you're going to hear it in language.
And can you use, I do this a lot, but I want to get your thoughts. Can
Sure.
you help coach, instruct leaders on the language that they use, which by way of doing that, one, brings attention to their mindset, which may not be one that is helpful to them, and two, possibly even change it?
So what we do when I do trainings with people, we tailor it to companies depending on what they want and who's in front of me. So if I'm dealing with their managers, we go through kind of stages. And the first stage before we get even to the scenarios in the language is we get them to understand what they're like and how they're potentially perceived as a manager. Because there's different styles of management and some work in different circumstances. So if someone's applying the same management style all the time, it's not going to work everywhere. So we
Mm,
take them through a couple of days, depending on who it is and how large it is. We take them through these stages of firstly their own personal understanding of who they are. Um, we do talk about the mind, but the reason we talk about the mind is because they are dealing with other people. They're going to have to understand who they're talking to. Now, sorry, your question was around the story side, if I'm correct. Am I right? Or did I
yeah,
bypass?
and how do you know whether or not the mindset has actually changed or not? You said just to repeat what you said you listen to the language and also see the results, and whether the results are changing could be an indication that the mindset has changed or the language is beginning to change.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you're going to find that people, they don't always verbalize, but they tend to verbalize more when you're good at extracting, right? So if you
Mm,
become good at having a conversation, they feel comfortable because the natural thing for a lot of people, depending on the individual, especially if you're a lower position, is to be fearful of the guy in front of you who could fire you.
sure.
So if you build the skill set of how to build that rapport with someone, you're going to hear more about what's happening in their mind if you become good at that skill.
Mm.
In regards to the storylines, how do we build storylines with people? Or have I just sidetracked you on that one as well?
No, 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 absolutely. That's perfect. Let's
How do we
do
build
that.
storylines? So the storyline. So
That's good.
I always used real stories because I had work history and I had done their roles before. Not
Yeah.
every manager has that, but they should be able to pull from their own history something that will relate to them. So if somebody was telling you they were struggling with sales, then it's a matter of giving them an example of someone else that you've worked with before that went through the same thing, but these are the things that were the issues for them. Let me just try. I'm just trying to think of. I'll give you a story of how for mind congruency, just in general. I don't give this one necessarily in a presentation, but I might do it on a podcast. So when I was 23 years of age, I worked in banking, and I was just a normal banker. It was pretty common in those days to join banking when I was young. And I'd worked in a couple of different banks by this stage. But I was what they call a lending officer. So you had the boss, I worked for the boss. He went out and got all the business. I wrote all the business stuff behind to get it all approved. And I had an office, and this office was like a half office. So it was like wood up to a point, then it was glass to a point, then it was open for the rest of it. But it had a door on it, which I never used. And one day I was sitting in my office, and I heard a noise. It was kind of loud. It was close to closing time, but I wasn't aware of it, close to work long hours. And I had someone working for me because I had so much backlog, and she sat opposite me in my office. Anyway, I looked up and I saw a guy with a balaclava on his head. And I thought, robbery. So I stood up, went out with the intention of, who knows, I was 23 years old. I don't know what I was intending, but I wasn't even thinking. I walked out, I turned to the girl with me and said, get down, it's a robbery. I walked out of my office, told someone else to get down, it's a robbery. And then I'm thinking, oh, I've got to set the alarm off because there's an internal alarm that goes to police. Turned around, realized someone had already hit the alarm, turned back around and made the split-second decision. Do I go tackle the situation? Now, I'm only 23 years old. People who are tellers are older than me. Do I stay? So I stood there and I watched, and I did what I was trained to do from the very first day in banking. In those days, a robbery was almost a weekly event in Australia. Absolutely. It was everywhere. There was a robbery somewhere. Banks were easy targets in those days. Today, you never hear of it, but in those days, they were easy targets. So when you join, one of the things that you are given or you learn to be able to fill out is a bandit description form. In other words, pay attention to what they're wearing, what weapon they've got, what hand they're holding in. So I was doing all of this in this heightened situation. Now, let me tell you, I'm the only person that was able to do this out of the whole group. And we were maybe 30, 40 people. It was a fairly large bank in those days. So I was doing all that. I stood there. The guy threw 5 bags over the counter and said to the main teller, fill the money. Just fill it up with cash. I want the large stuff, fill it up. So she gave it to the other tellers. They start filling the bags. They give them back to her. She hands the bags back to her, and he goes, well, I gave you 5 bags. Where's the 5th bag? And she goes, I only got 4. And he grabbed, it was a sawn-off shotgun. He grabbed it, put it to her head, and we all stood there thinking this is the longest 2 seconds that ever happened in our lives. And he pulled it back and he ran. Now, while this was all happening, I could see all my colleagues under desks. I was the only person standing except for the tellers there. And they all told me afterwards, they said, we were all fearful for you because you're the only person we could see. Because I was about a couple of feet back from them. So the guy runs, I run to the door, thinking one or two things. Either I'm going to do a chase, but he's got a gun. Instead, I locked the door because I also knew that everyone was a witness, and every customer we had at the time was trying to run out. And I said, you can't run anywhere. The police need to interview all of you. So I was the only person that was able to do that. So the question is, how did you do that? I'm no hero. Why were you able to do that? So when I joined the banking industry, wherever I worked, I used to mentally play this story in my head. what would I do if we suddenly got robbed?
Hmm.
Because when I worked in my first bank, I worked in lending as well. And it was a very large branch, but our boss was what was called the manager of managers, which was there's like a managers club, and he managed the managers club. So he knew all the managers across the state. And he used to get every phone call for every robbery. And I used to hear, I didn't hear them all, but he'd come out and go, so and so branch has been knocked off. This bank's been knocked off today as well. So I used to hear all of these stories. So when I started in banking, I started making these stories in my head of if a person came, what would I do? How would I handle this? They came through this door, would they jump the
Hmm.
counter? All this type of thing. So I was reinforcing this over and over again. And essentially what I was doing was conditioning my subconscious to react for me.
Hmm.
I recreated my operating system without realizing what I was doing. I just did it myself. I was recreating my operating system. So when it happened, I didn't fall apart. I actually took control of the situation.
Hmm.
I didn't cause any issues to my colleagues, but when the doors were closed and the regional management arrived and the police arrived and the councillors arrived, so we had everybody there. I went upstairs to check on the staff, and we used to have a bar in our not quite our lunchroom, but next to our lunchroom, which was for Friday drinks.
Hmm.
They drank everything. These guys drank everything in the bar. It was all on the tables everywhere.
Yeah.
But it kind of told you how we react depending on how our subconscious is trained.
So it's a great story. So are you proposing that leaders, managers, what have you, should almost do scenario planning
Yeah.
in their own minds about situations I mean, of course, certain things you can't plan for. You don't know. You had the luxury and you had the fortune, great fortune, to be able to hear all this and then begin to think, what would I do in this situation? Because you're overhearing it. But there are sometimes that managers just don't know what to plan for. But I think, I'm now answering my own question. There are certain things that we know that we probably resist over and over and over again. I don't want to have a crucial conversation with anybody because I hate conflict. But to
Yeah.
begin to imagine having those conversations successfully over and over again, to your story's point, maybe it'll be easier when it actually happens.
Sometimes you need to expose yourself to, firstly, not just thinking, but also situations so that you do become accustomed to it. Um,
Hmm.
when I when I was maybe 24, so a similar age group, same bank, um, I was moved into a sales role and I was really ambitious. I really wanted to write a lot of business. And I got to know the local real estate agents because I was dealing with property at the time. And so I proposed to them, why don't do a presentation to your landlords? And they said that'd be a great idea. I'd never done public speaking before, and even the occasions when I kind of had to in the bank, I was nervous as hell.
Hmm.
Now, hopefully most managers don't have this issue, or they probably wouldn't get the management. But what I and my first experience when I did that was terrible because I couldn't even open my mouth. Like I had only 20 people in front of me, which for some people 20 people is a lot. I can speak in front of 1,000 people now, but at the time it was like I couldn't get the words out, and then I got started and eventually I was fine. It was embarrassing to say the least. Repetition is also part of this situation. Is Have you ever had people that have lied about a subject and done it so often that they actually don't know what the truth is anymore
Hmm.
because they have reinforced their subconscious in that story so many times? It is the truth now.
Is that what a sociopath ends up doing?
I don't know about I never studied
I
sociopaths,
don't know.
but
I haven't either, but
um,
people who might do things that the rest of us would say was quite egregious and
oh,
wrong.
I'm not sure. There might be some other issues there, but
Okay, certainly
potentially,
I'm being simplistic about it, but I'm just curious your thoughts.
I think. I mean, I can remember working with a guy he was a great guy. He's a funny guy. Everyone loved him. He never told the truth.
Huh.
Un- and I used to be able to pick it because I'm an observer of people and always have been. But he was the best liar I ever met in my life. And eventually I picked up just before he was going to lie, it was a slight movement of his eye that would tell me that he was lying about something.
You could pick up on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it took me a while because he was really good at it. He'd been doing it since he was a kid.
So what you're telling me, which I think we all need to kind of remember, is that that voice in our head, the more we repeat the same message, becomes a subconscious plant, that it becomes something that we probably are going to be creating a habit around, whether it's a positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Just to your story about the robbery, you'd already reinforced that enough times in your head that when it happened, no big deal, where not as big a deal as everybody else had. But that self-talk is very, very, very powerful.
Absolutely.
So it's almost, and I think when I'm talking to people about this is that it's a habit. It's almost like something that you don't even think about
Well,
thinking about.
that's where your habits sit. They sit
Yeah.
with the subconscious.
So it's almost like you have to will yourself to a new thought pattern versus the one that is habitual.
So I call it, I use the term catch and replace. We are usually unaware of our habits. Sometimes people hold a mirror up to us and go, "Do you realize you do this?" And you might go, "Yeah, I do know it." But a lot of times we do things and we're not just unaware of it. It's because something triggers it and it just happens. So it's our response. If you capture or you catch this when you're in the midst of doing this and
Mm.
replace it with another habit, do this repetitively over and over again, you've created a new habit to replace that operating system.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's something that I've heard people say that it doesn't feel authentic to be thinking something other than my habit.
I haven't heard that one,
It feels
but
like bullshit. Like, why am I saying this to myself? I don't feel strong. This feels like Tony Robbins, live with passion. I mean, I'm everything but that right now. I feel depressed. I feel overwhelmed. And now I'm
I
trying to
get that.
override those even physical, biological, chemical reactions that are happening within my body that say to feel a certain way. And now I'm trying to override that with my mind. I know it's powerful. It can be done, but it's not always easy.
I didn't say it was easy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but everybody has to take the first step.
Yeah.
And the view I've had ever since I was I guess a young person is that um, if they can do it, I can do it.
Right.
In other words, if someone else has that ability, if Dean has this ability to do something that I can't do, unless there's something physically wrong with me that you might be an athlete and maybe I just don't have that ability,
Sure.
then there's no reason that I can't do it. The only thing that stops me is me and my past conditioning.
Yeah.
If I can change my past conditioning, then I can actually make a difference. Now, for your listeners who are probably business people, I suspect, listening to a conversation like this, some of them really love this stuff, and other people just turn off and go, "This is not reality for me." Now, I've managed businesses, I've managed hundreds of staff, and I work for myself nowadays. So I get that. I get that thinking. What I also understand is that none of you would have gone to a car dealership, a brand new car dealership, and bought a car with three wheels and said, "But it still drives,"
Right.
right? We always go, "No, no, no. Where's the fourth wheel? It's got to be operating properly for me to get the results that I want." So if I'm going to drive from, I know you're in California, I'm going to drive from California to New York, and I'm not going too far on three wheels.
Right.
And that's the same thing with us and the people we work with. This is the reason why you want to learn this. Firstly, for yourself. And secondly, because you want to build a high performing team, you need to create change so they become the high performing team. And then you create that environment that it is expected to be high performing and
Yeah.
they expect it of themselves. And that's the change work that you do.
Yes. Yes. So going back to the individual, let's just say they don't even run a team. It's just a person who's listening to this. Um, I can sense that there are going to be some people out there who go, I do this, but I'm also aware that it's not a one and done. Just because I have this ability to choose a different mindset and I might even practice it a few times, like what you just described with your robbery story. I might I might go back to my old behavior or my old patterns or my old habits. Can you speak to that in terms of that progress is incremental, but it's not overnight?
So you need to build what I call a focus ensemble, which essentially is people around you that have your best interest at heart,
Hmm.
right? Because you may have heard this term before, and I didn't invent it, but I like using it. You're familiar with an autopilot in a plane, right? The autopilot on the plane essentially the pilot takes a plane up, they turn on the autopilot, it's going to travel at a certain speed and it's going to travel at a certain height. Now, what happens is if there's a gust of wind and it takes me higher than I set it at, the plane brings me right back. That's what the autopilot's job is to do. This is your subconscious. It's been set at a certain level.
Hmm.
Now, if we have people around us, what we tend to do is we gravitate to people that have the same level of autopilot setting.
Oh,
Think about
good.
this for a
That's
moment.
that's good. That's good. I like that.
Think about this. Think about your friends, family, even people that you married.
Hmm.
You got attracted for various reasons, but they usually have a very similar autopilot to you. So let's say, for example, you got inspired and you go, I went to one of Manny's sessions, one of Dean's sessions. I got really inspired. I'm going to go do some training and now I'm going to be something else. I'm going to be more than what I was. And you go home or you go to your friends and you're having a beer with your friends on the weekend and you're going, we should do this. We should. And they're going, I just want to sit and watch the football. Like,
Yeah.
it's not a big deal. Now I get that. That's our friends. That's our relationship,
Yeah.
but you're changing.
Yep.
And what you need around you are the reinforcement of those that want you to change, not the ones that don't want you to change. They want you to be the same as what you were when you're in high school.
That's good. I like that. That's very good. Good reminder.
So the focus ensemble is that group of people that you seek out that go, I want to get to their level. I want to think like they think.
Hmm.
It's like seeking out the best salesperson
Right.
and going, how do you do this?
So let me ask you one other quick question here. I'm listening to what you're saying, driving in my car. I'm feeling like I'm self sabotaging myself. I want to scale, I want to grow, I want to dream, I want to have all that sort of stuff, whatever my goals might be. But I do know that I'm getting in my own way, but I don't even know how. I don't know how I'm getting in my own way. I just know that I am, and it frustrates the heck out of me, right? There's somebody out there that probably feels that way. How do I know how I'm getting in my way so therefore that I can start intending something else?
So I always say it's awareness and observation. It's a little
What
bit
is an
like
ups say that Yeah?
observation and awareness.
Awareness, okay, yeah.
Sorry, it might be my accent, Dean.
No worries.
um, if you become aware and start to notice things, you'll see how you operate. So many years ago, I did neuro linguistic programming, which you may have done or you'd be familiar
Sounds like it based on how you're talking, yeah.
with. Okay. But before I did that, I was actually a financial planner at the time, and I was a high performing financial planner. And one day, and don't ask me why this happened, but I started to notice my body language, but I had not had any training or anything like that. I basically started to notice that if my client moved a certain way, so did I.
Hmm,
I started to match them. Now, you know this if you've done NLP, it's an NLP term, but I was not NLP trained.
hmm,
I just suddenly became aware of what I was doing. Suddenly I was matching them. I was managing their tonality. I was doing, and all of this at the first threw me out because I'm thinking, God, I'm noticing what I'm doing. Now, I didn't need to change what I was doing because I'd learnt it over time. But the same thing applies with how we operate. How do we talk to our children, for example? How do we say things? How do we say things to a team? Certain words get different responses from different people. Pay attention to how they react to that.
hmm.
It's like me telling you about the guy that lied really, really well. when I would talk about this with other people, they go, no, he's a really funny guy. He's a great guy. That I'm going, yeah, but he's lying to all of you. You're not even aware that he's lying to you because he's so convincing. And he puts in half-truths so you think it's real, right? You can confirm the half-truth. It's the other bit that is the lie. And so you need to start becoming aware and observing other people. If you're talking to a staff member and they say X, watch their face, watch their eyes. We talk about active. Listen to what they're actually saying, not what you think they're saying.
It's good.
I'm sure you've heard this all before with other.
Yeah, but no, it's very good. It's a great reminder. It's really good. So Manny, to talk with you all day on this sort of stuff, how can people learn more about this, especially what you do and how you do it? How can they connect with you?
So they can go to one or two websites. So I have them. Our main company is called My Growth Corporation. It's a .com. My Growth Corporation is a personal development company. So we have different things that we provide. If they're talking about specifically about this type of training, which we can either do online like this or I can do in person, that is mannyfiteni.com. So MANNYFITENI. And they can just contact us and reach out and we can talk about it and we tailor programs to businesses. So it might be just their managers that they think need this training, or maybe it goes even a little bit further and they want, how do we build these teams?
Well, I think this is very important work. I've always thought that behavior follows perception. Another way of saying is behavior follows mindset or your subconscious. And you're getting right to it because I think we spend so much time working on the tasks and the goals and the strategies, and we miss the actual engine that makes all this happen, which is this work that you're talking about. So great work. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Leadervation with Dean Newland. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com or check the show notes. Reimagine, facilitate, flourish. Transform your leadership success with Leadervation.